just do. Right, so we're talking about last night's All Black Australia test,
Yeah,
which was a mental game. It was a game of two halves, and pretty much just papered over every crack that the All Blacks had.
yeah, especially when the cracks are relatively minor things, but they don't seem to adjust to them when things aren't going well. You know.
It's, do you think Bowden Barrett was just horrendous? And then just did the Australians take a sleeping pill at halftime?
Well, to say that the Australians run out of gas um, doesn't reflect that they've all been through a super competition, and they must be as fit as they can be.
Well, is it like the playoffs thing in NBA, where it's sort of rust versus rest, and the fact that a lot of the All Blacks got to play in the final, that they probably were still match fit, and most of the Australians hadn't had any rugby for how many weeks,
Yeah,
and so maybe they just weren't match fit.
yeah, maybe. I think also the Australians actually, in attack, ran onto their pass as well. They drifted a wee bit, but
I
they
thought,
did. They were a threat with the ball in hand, and then you have this contrary thing with the All Blacks, where they don't stand passing width apart. They in fact stand closer, especially for Aaron Smith's pass.
yeah,
They stand flat, so that often they're getting the ball and the man at the same time, and they bungle their passes because of the pressure they apply to themselves. But it does seem that in the second half, the effect of the bruising battle in the first half and contact affected the Australians more than us.
but
It was
it
quite
was
ironical. Yeah.
it was weird. Ironical's not a word, but um, after 5 minutes, Marshall said that the Australians are gassed, but I don't know how you can come out of the second half and after 5 minutes be completely gassed.
Oh, yeah, I find a lot of what Marshall says. He's straining to sound intellectual.
Well, it's after the fact, like at half time, he was saying how the All Blacks had so much possession that they didn't really get the return for it. And then in the second half, at the end of the second half, it was like, oh well, the All Blacks didn't really have much possession in the first half. That's why they didn't do too well.
Yeah, well, the All Blacks don't play percentage rugby in that first half. They kick off to concede possession to the opposition, or when the opposition kicks off to them and they get the ball inside their 22 or inside their 10-yard box, they try to play as if they're on the opposition goal line.
Yeah,
And they're not looking to give themselves a field position. And given that they have three line-out forwards who can contest the ball, they're in a position to put the ball out well inside Australian territory,
yeah,
especially off Crotty or Leonard Brown, and then at three places in the line out contest the Australian ball so that they've got both possession and field position, you
yeah.
know.
When you talk, just look at the camera
Okay.
instead of off. It was kind of hilarious how surprised and amazed the referees were when Barrett did a kick that went half the field off a penalty down the line, because no one ever does it. No one
Well,
ever makes
yeah,
kicks, and they were like, "Oh my goodness, look at that kick!" And
yeah,
it's like, I was saying to you, I'm like, are the Bulls heavier? Have the Bulls got worse than they used to kick, and that was a conscious decision? But that doesn't seem to be the case. It's just that kicking has got so poor, and they waste so much energy in the wrong half,
yeah.
trying to make something. It's the amount of times Barrett looks when he's going to ground with the ball, just flailing passes. Like he did one pass before they got the first sort of breakaway try, where he was falling out and he had sort of knocked on the ball, and he just sort of bashed it back towards his own line, and the Australians by that point were so all over the place, especially their captain, who he looked as if he shouldn't have even come out at the second half.
Yeah.
And like because Pocock was doing his usual borderline cheating constantly.
Yeah.
Like, and slowing everything up. But once they couldn't slow things up, they were done.
Yeah. Yeah. And the ironic thing was that Hooper and Pocock should have been able to split that task between them, whereas we had just Sam Cane. Others may have been able to give him a hand, especially they say the midfield backs. But the later the game that went, the more effective we became at the post tackle as compared to the Australians. It's almost as if the two of them didn't know what role they were meant to be performing.
And almost the case where if one guy gets there for the first one, the other one can just sit out instead of both trying to go for the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, you've got to assess then whether the ball's going to come back quickly or slowly. And quite frankly, from after the tackle and the thing we call a ruck, if it doesn't come back quickly, it's hardly worth having because you don't make the gain line.
Yeah. Well, there were so many times when the game got really, really loose that you saw defenders going when there was just a person on the ground, and the defenders going back and taking up a position as you would in a ruck that didn't exist because the person was just on the ground. Yeah. And they could have stood by the person who was getting past it if they wanted to, but they just conventionally go back.
Yeah. Well, it seems there that if you're the defending team, there's a real opportunity for counter-rucking, which we saw in some of the provincial games earlier in the day.
Yeah, the provincial stuff looked. I only saw a bit of Auckland counties.
Yeah,
it looked a lot more back and forth.
Oh, and also the coaches at that level would demand that the passes are accurate, that the passes are held onto, that you don't make 50-50 passes, that you run onto the ball, and yet our national team seems to have tolerance in all those areas, so long as come the end of the game, they've got the scoreline they wanted.
It's only certain players, though. If it wasn't for the centre partnership of like Leonard Brown came on and did a decent job.
Yeah.
And who's the other fella? The blonde guy. He did never drops a ball, takes those shitty passes from Barrett and Smith and the mustachioed porn star from Waikato, and has to take big hits, but never gives it up, never misses a tackle. The amount of for a first 5'8" to lose as much possession as Beauden Barrett does. Yeah. It's just like you're waiting for. Like his first half was one of the first. I didn't expect him to come out in the second half actually.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they were panicking because the person you turn to is the player of the Super League, but is a complete liability as well.
Yeah.
And they got so but they're never going to get their comeuppance. Like if Australia can have a half like that and then not follow on, like who it might be Ireland and Dublin maybe, or South Africa in South Africa, but that will not be enough to sort of change the philosophy of letting the forwards do all the dirty work.
Yeah.
And like those locks that we have are just so exceptional. And
Yeah.
Retallick had the best tight forward game of any All Black ever.
Oh, yeah. That, especially when the guy showed enough speed to run 40 metres to score a bloody try.
And not look out of gas.
Terrific.
I think your mate Murray might be wrong about Retallick losing it.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
He was just exceptional.
Yeah.
He never gets tired, and I'm glad. Did they take him? They did take him off at the end, but I hate when they take him off. Because they lose so much immediately. But
I think
it didn't matter.
The other interesting thing there is that they had him in the attack line wider out. So he actually had more space around himself rather than finding a defender to run into. In that space, he's capable of beating a man.
He's capable of beating a man. Anyone who gets in his way, he takes delight in smashing, and he carries the ball in two hands.
Yeah.
And, not in two hands, but he's got so much strength, and the person can't really wrap him up that he can get a ball away.
Yeah.
It was just, and what was going wrong with the Australian line-out?
If you looked at the facial expressions of the hooker, he was feeling threatened all the time. And he was almost in panic mode as time went on. And they were getting close to the time where the referee says, throw it in, or otherwise there's a free kick.
Well, would you not just... Did Whitelot get any ball off their Australian throw? Can't remember.
I think he got about 3 deflections.
3 deflections. So it wasn't a case of just throwing away from Retallick, and they didn't have a third option.
Where you put the pressure on, wouldn't you?
But wouldn't you, if you were getting that screwed at the lifting jump, wouldn't you just throw to one?
Oh, that's exactly right. If your line-out's not operating, the less time the ball is in the air, the more chances you have of winning it.
Or you throw it all the way down the back.
All the way down, and you don't throw a flat throw.
No.
You throw a throw that's lobbed, so that no one in the guts of the line-out can get near it because it's so far over the head, and it's dropping on the back.
And even if you'd almost want the opposition to catch that, so you can tackle them and get the ball.
Oh,
if it's that loopy, but it was because the Australians and their backs look good.
Yeah, well, they are capable of running onto their passes, and
they seemed like they were consciously doing that.
Yeah,
and Guinea and Foley were playing confidently. It was weird that winger did that crazy kick. But Barrett, and I would really like to see Barrett and Ben Smith timed. Well, I'm sure there's heaps of times of how fast they actually are, but they seem to be able to catch anyone from behind.
Yeah.
Which is really weird. And Ben Smith had another good game.
Oh yeah. Well, he's not frightened of contact. I think he must be physically pretty strong when he takes the ball into the tackle, But the other thing I'd like to see them organise is a counter-attack from the kick.
Yeah.
But I felt last night that not enough of our team reloaded, got back to give him support. So most of the time he had to take it into contact or try and beat a man.
Yeah.
And also got caught in contact.
Yeah.
But I would like to see the midfield, one of the wings, perhaps in number 8, drop back. So you've got a 5 back there. Really to counter-attack with the ball,
Yeah. As a coach, would you just look at the first half? What would you even focus on? Ball retention in the first half was abysmal.
Yeah. Ball retention, but also momentum. And not momentum of one guy just grabbing the ball and charging into 2 or 3 defenders, but a line running onto their passes. It can be backs and forwards, but also because you've got so many in the attack line from phase play, people entering the line from depth and changing the pace of the attack. So they're running reasonably fast, and then someone comes off someone's shoulder and slams on the gas.
Yeah.
And it's that old-fashioned thing of the extra man entering the line.
Yeah. There's no such thing as like in every other sport where there's speed, like soccer or basketball. It's not constant speed.
Yeah.
It's the change of pace. Yeah. So a slower player can get around someone, and then as a team in rugby, the change of pace is most devastating because you got people flat-footed. But if you're constantly going at that 100% all the time, then the defense can be relatively dumb.
Yeah, it can. Yeah, and I think the other thing they have to realise is that if they go left, they create space on the right, and if they go right, they create space on the left. And the guy who comes into that space comes from the direction the ball carrier is running to, because he's dragging them all across, and the guy comes back in there. That's where you get your change of pace and change of angle.
Yeah. With because I thought Guinea, they were constructing things. He was doing really good things like changing where forwards were where he wanted them to. Whereas Aaron Smith, like his energy, his confidence and speed and stuff is fantastic, but you can tell his first thought is his only thought. And when he gets the ball, where he's looking is where the ball's going. And he has his favourite people he likes to pass to. And he hits them first. None of it is strategic.
No,
and
it's just momentum, really.
Yeah.
And if it's slow ball, there's no momentum. And so you've got to start again.
There was one point in the first half where they tried a rolling maul. And it was really funny because they had everybody there and Aaron Smith at the back, and you can tell no one had done it in so long that they didn't know what to do. They had this mass of a really, really stable platform, and there was no, back in the day where the halfbacks would grab a guy and go left, go right, try and guess where the pressure's coming from and roll that way. They sort of got the ball and they're like, Steve Hansen said we should try this. And they got the ball and they sort of just held it there and kind of pushed, and they're like, I hope the ref tells us we've got to use it or lose it so we can get on to what we usually do. But, which is just ignoring a fantastic big weapon.
Yeah.
Because then the next one they went to a really nice move off the line out where they moved the ball twice instead of just once, and then someone dropped it as they were going over the line. Yeah. But it's sort of, you got to think what the play that can come off of a rolling maul would be devastating.
Especially when you roll it into their inside backs.
Yeah. Roll it inside backs, and then you have a winger loitering behind the halfback to come on to whatever forward makes some space.
Yeah. All he's got to do is pop it up for him, and he hits it at speed, and you're away. Yeah. But the other thing about the maul is that you've got to be told that we want your body position to be like you have in the scrum.
Yeah.
And if you assume that, you've got a maul that can really accelerate.
Yeah, because if you go back and watch it, one of the props was just sort of leaning on somebody. It was really weird, because you've got to think if the All Blacks are stronger in the scrum, they've got to be a lot. If you're stronger in the scrum, you've got to be a lot better in the maul. And if you're not moving it, what's wrong? Because they don't know where the pressure's coming from. If you guys know exactly what pressure's from, maybe that's the problem, that the halfback isn't identifying where your pressure is and to move people where the pressure is going to be. Yeah.
I remember them practicing some years ago where the whole aim was to keep the maul square, and I was with the coaches afterwards, and I said, why are you worrying about keeping the maul square?
Yeah.
Why don't you roll it and you take the opposition right out of the game because they're left on the blind side?
That's the opposite. It's called a rolling maul for a reason.
Yeah.
Because like you feel the pressure and you move away from the pressure. It's not like this blind thing. Once you get momentum, you can go straight. But at the
Yeah.
beginning, you've got to like feel the pressure and roll away from it, and then
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it just hasn't been used for so long that even the players that are playing now probably didn't grow up with it.
But and it still remains as the only method by which you can force a commitment from the defence. So you might get an overlap in a backline.
Yeah.
The post tackle and the thing that's not a ruck, but they call a ruck, you're playing against a defence line that outnumbers you, and there is no space. All right, you can work it in different ways, but there's really no space, and there's no space to put the ball behind them either, because there's all these legs that you can kick into.
Well, should the rule be reversed back to how it used to be? That if the maul is moving forward, you get and it stays in there, you get the put into the scrum.
Yeah,
how it used to be.
Yeah.
Which I think is fair. Like if you get to stop the maul and get momentum, you should get the ball. But I think that rule is like an antiquated rule back to when teams like England and South Africa would just keep the ball in the maul for like 5 minutes and the game would be dead. But no one does that anymore.
Yeah.
And
well, one rule they brought in was that they allowed tackling the ball carrier in the maul, which you're allowed to do in every other part of the game. And so if you're going to allow the maul to be retained at the scrum going forward, it also means that you've got to give the defence a method of stopping it. And why? Apparently tackling in a maul is dangerous. I'm not sure of it myself because a lot of them end up on the ground anyway.
yeah.
But why you're not allowed to tackle someone in the maul, apart from a spurious safety issue, I don't agree with. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, would tackling play at someone in the maul be? Would you end up with wrestling moves? Like, well, you can't trip low, can you? So
No,
you can't
well,
sort of hip throw or something like that.
Yeah, I think if you drive into the ball carrier and tackle him about the level of the ball, and then use your arm to lift his leg so he's got no traction.
Yeah.
You can get things going then.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you got to see what's the definition of a tackle.
Yeah.
If you're putting your body on somebody else, is that a tackle? Does a tackle have to be a completed tackle to the ground?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know, actually. I don't know about...
Yeah.
Because the holding the player up to get the turnover at the maul, it's deemed to be a tackle if that player can get his knee on the ground.
Yeah, oh yeah. That's
Which is a horrible... Very difficult.
It's a horrible league law.
If you're in a maul, you can't see when the ball carrier's put his knee on the ground.
Well, it's funny when the Soolo or got the Australian, they got the ball that led to that sort of weird try, and the guy's knee was on the ground, and Marshall was like, "Oh, they got away with something there." So they got away with something by ripping the ball off and then going through 7 pairs of hands to run 3/4 of the field. Oh, they really didn't deserve that. That was bizarre. What do you think? Like, because my only problem, the forwards were unbelievable. A halfback, I have problems with him, just in how he plays. But like, you can't really. He's kind of like it has been for a lot of New Zealand halfbacks. It's once they get in and you keep on winning, it's hard to replace them. And there's always the second guy is always good.
Yeah.
Because I find him
halfbacks and hookers.
Yeah, I find him more confident in the game. But he does. Aaron Smith does. He's always there. I think his endurance must be phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah.
But do you think you would lose anything by getting rid of Barrett and bringing in a stable first five?
Oh no, I think that if you brought in a stable first five and said that every starter pass from Aaron Smith goes to that guy who dictates the terms of the game,
And
but yeah,
yeah, because like it's this thing where we're going to be in this close game and we'll need some mercurial person to open up the game, but that that's I think is a myth because it's all the hard work that the forwards and the loose forwards and even the centers do because to maintain it. And when someone like Barrett or what's the Waikato first five? Mackenzie does
yeah.
is from. It's like having a first 15 player in the All Blacks.
Yeah.
Who's just running around and like they get gaps off of everybody else's hard work. But I don't think you lose anything by replacing that person with somebody who's competent.
Especially when he's so hard to support because the rest of the team are not sure what's on.
Well, how many times has Beauden Barrett gone to the ground and just thrown it as if if he touches the ground, the ball goes on fire? And it's either a knock on or how many times he's thrown it into somebody's face as they're coming down to support him.
Yeah. And yet all it seems to be is if he gets a break, and especially if he gets a try, those demeanours are neglected.
They're gone.
Are no longer important.
Because he gave up in the first half. He gave up the ball about 6 or 7 times.
Yeah.
If anybody else, can you imagine a halfback or a loose forward knocking it on 6 or 7 times and them ever getting another chance?
Yeah. Do you think the coaches are prepared to let them play that style of rugby?
But it's only
as they get the result.
But it's only 1 or 2 people playing that style. Yeah. Everybody else is playing. You sort of hate to say it, but like it's a very Canterbury style of play. Like all the loose forwards and stuff. It's not spectacular. There's no one doing massive steps or even big runs beating a lot of people. It's just constant pressure and speed and decent handling. And I think when someone's not doing that, it stands out and they seem as if they're on another level or something like that. And it's more that they're just not, I don't know, they both have really amazing pace, which allows them to get away with a lot of stuff. But man, like when he tried to run it out from inside his own 22 from a kick and got caught in the first half, it's just, man, the Australians could have been up.
Oh, yeah.
But it's the sort of thing where I don't think there's ever going to be a time where you couldn't have them in and be okay. But whether or not you could put somebody in and it would be better.
It'd be interesting to see if they retain this style and they have the two sort of, if you want to put a nice word on it, enterprising number 10s. That is there no team in the world that cannot see those errors. Do they get blinded by the score the same way we do?
Which I don't know what you would do. If I was playing the All Blacks, I would, if Barrett or Mackenzie were playing, leave them gaps, put your fastest person on them to sort of cover that gap as a sweeper. And once they get caught, they so often throw wild passes that you just surround them because they don't look when they pass either. So it would be a hard thing to pull off because you'd have to create that huge gap. But it has been done before, like when Liner was playing, they would leave that huge gap for him and put a loose forward behind the line, let him run and just hammer him.
Yeah. No, you leave a gap and create a gap and then close the shop on them. Yeah.
But they're so good. But they're so quick. Because he is really quick. You'd have to have someone who is exceptional.
Yeah.
And the loose forwards cover for him anyway. So it's so tough. Because because
Yeah.
you sort of it's opportunity costs in some respects.
Yeah,
And I think it's so hard to get rid of a player who's making so many mistakes when you're winning.
Well, and you can't deny that they do play a big part in the winning in a positive sense, because the odd time it does come off,
Yeah.
it causes an awful lot of damage in the opposition.
And an awful lot of frustration, I think. You could see who's the Aussie captain?
Pocock, isn't it?
No,
Hooper.
Pocock. Hooper.
Yeah.
Hooper. He seemed. They seemed after like the first and second try, they seemed like just devastated. They had put in all that work and shut down everything, and I mean, it's kind of like a berserker type of thing, wild card type of thing that you know. If you've got a fast bowler who occasionally the ball slips out of their hand and beams this guy and you go, well, I have no control out of it, is a hell of a lot scarier than someone who's got control.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but I just wondered with the Australians, while their attack line was running onto their passes, you just wonder why they aren't putting someone in a gap or even mauling themselves. Their forwards really aren't up to much, are they? They were right for 20 minutes and that was it.
The joy that the All Black forwards take in tackling is like when you see Retallick and all the loose forwards just hitting people, and they're not spectacular hits, but you can tell they hurt.
Yeah.
You get those the big guys. They Australia always has their Polynesian of the week that they put in that's going to be able to run against the All Blacks and never can.
No.
And always gets hit hard, and then they sort of just because he didn't have much of an impact on the game, and I think they put him in there for his running. And they always lose somebody because of that, because that person's not doing the groundwork. Well, they're not as good at doing the groundwork, and they're not good at running. I think Australia's been good when they've left it up to their backs to do the running.
Yeah, and that's right. And I think also the All Blacks predominantly do low tackles.
Yeah,
which makes the ball contestable.
Low hard tackles that get the player to the ground fast.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the second player is always
and they double up on the tackle too.
Yeah. Oh man, some of the hits.
Yeah.
Or just you can tell the Australians would. You'd be. It's kind of like switching, going and playing an island where you're just frustrated because you're not getting big hits, but you're just getting taken down. But the All Blacks hit hard too and low.
Yeah.
How long can Checker has Checker got photos of somebody that keeps him in the job? I've never seen a coach that's so arrogant and is so entitled to his position and fails so miserably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, how can he maintain his position?
Yeah. Well, he's got Larkham there too, who may be a help. But he doesn't seem to sit with the rest of them either. He seems to be in a box of his own, and the other members of the Australian coaching team are in a separate place.
Like his speciality is looking pissed off. It's everybody else's fault.
Yeah.
And with a second half like that, I would love to know what he said at halftime, or if they are just unfit. I don't know. They're forward pack, but then they haven't got a tight five.
No.
Like there's none of their tight five were mentioned doing anything decent.
No.
And you've got the two loose forwards who are decent to annoying, and a decent backline.
Yeah.
Like it's a shame that Israel thingy is off. Looks like I didn't read. Do you know if he's done?
No.
It didn't look good.
No, I didn't. No, but yeah, I think they don't seem to have a pattern of play, or if they do have one that they're trying to play to, it's not to the talent they have available.
Well, they had barely any ball.
Uh,
Like it's pretty hard. Like they, even though they were up at half time, it was through two penalties and the All Blacks dropping passes.
yeah,
And so, I mean, you can't really, have a pattern of play with no ball.
no. I think too the thing to realise is that if the 50-50 passes that were mucked up by the All Blacks and some of the bad handling, if every one of the passes stuck, God, you can't imagine what the bloody score would be.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Because you get the feeling that the All Blacks went into the second half being okay. There's nothing to panic about. Where I don't know do you think the Australians went in going, we have a chance here, or we're just holding on?
If they thought they had a chance there, they had to query why they weren't scoring tries, why they weren't penetrating.
Yeah.
All right, they were attacking with the ball in hand.
Yeah.
At times it looked good, but it was never completed.
Yeah, I mean, like the score line probably gave them false hope.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't a true... Because...
Yeah.
They never... I don't know what the time in their own half was. It seems like they were just holding up. Because it was interesting, like there wasn't many substitutions that were needed or effective, other than just sort of garbage time at the end of the game.
Yeah.
Like, and on the All Blacks, you're always going to lose a lot when you take away the locks and stuff like that, but not as much as it seems with the Australians, because I think once they're if your scrum is giving away penalty after penalty, and you can't throw the ball into the line out, it's no wonder they lost by so much. It was just weird that there was that first half that the scoreline was the scoreline.
And based on the results and what Australians like to back, which is winners, the game is in a bit of trouble, I would think, in Australia.
Oh well, how long's Cheika been in that position? Since the World Cup?
Since the World Cup, I think.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Unbelievable. I've never seen a coach have such poor results against the team that's the only team that really matters for Australians to beat, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
And they lost to Ireland at home for the first time.
Yeah.
And what do they have to? Who do they have to lose to for his job to be threatened?
Yeah. Well, the one thing you got to hand it to Hansen and those others is they show no emotion at all. They're just busy looking at the game, whereas he's totally emotional throughout.
Yeah, but it's pretty easy to be emotionless when things are going well.
Yeah.
But he said, most of his energy is getting pissed off.
Yeah.
You know.
Which isn't a good example for the rest of his team. You wonder what they're thinking of him. You know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Should we leave it there?